just want to let you know that if you could keep yourself on mute at this time, and that would help on background noise. Also, if you have a question for the presenters, if you could type them in the chat box and we'll get to them at the end. Thank you. It is my great pleasure to introduce Tom Cody, President and owner of Pathmakers, and Beth Mendoza, Executive Leadership Coach at Pathmakers.
Good afternoon, everybody.
Hello.
First of all, thank you to Mickey and to the Chamber for giving us the opportunity to present to you this afternoon. This is a first for me. I've never done a virtual presentation before, so it's kind of interesting. I can't see you. So hopefully if it's crashing and burning, I won't have to see it. So I hope this is of use to you this afternoon. Beth and I have spent a bit of time kind of talking about what can we do to help you chart the path back to the new normal. And so we're going to kind of break our presentation into two pieces. The first part of it is really going to be to give you a practical tool to walk out of the room with, a simple change process model that we developed back probably almost 20 years ago now. We were searching for a change process model, and I think way back in the day, I did a Google search and got 8.5 million hits and decided, okay, there's a lot of variations on a theme. What can we do to create a simple one? So this is a change process model that we're hoping will be pretty simple to grasp. It certainly is something that we could spend hours talking about, but in the spirit of getting you out by 5 o'clock sharp this afternoon, we'll make sure that we keep it a little shorter than that. So I'm going to go through a quick change process model that hopefully you can walk out the door with, and then I'm going to hand over the presentation to Beth so that she can, I was kidding about 5 o'clock, Mickey, don't worry, you don't have to turn your camera back on. I'll hand it back off to Beth, and she will take you through 5 areas of focus as you chart the path back to the new normal. So take a deep breath, get ready to drink from a fire hose. Here we go. So the first thing that I need to do is learn how to use this, apparently. Okay, here we go. So the change process, where we're going to start today is kind of what we call the unwritten laws of change that we have taken the time to actually write down for you today. The first one is that change is constant and inevitable. Way back in 500 BC, Heraclitus was quoted as saying the only thing that is constant is change. And we wanted to kind of talk about how it impacts tasks and processes as well as people and relationships. That as you're moving through change, it isn't just what we're doing, but it's also it impacts people and our relationship to one another. And so we want to make sure we talk about that a little bit today. The second law is that there's 2 sources of change. There's external change and internal change. Examples of external change would be the weather. Happy Mother's Day belated to you mothers. It would have been nice to have a day like the day before for Mother's Day as opposed to gloomy. That would be an example of external change. Gas prices, this wonderful virus that we are learning to live with, are some good examples of external change. And internal change really can be changes that we make as an organization, that we're going to streamline our processes, we're going to buy a new piece of equipment, we're going to hire a key role. I want to lose 50 pounds that I've gained during sequestration or during quarantine, whatever the case might be. Change follows a predictable pattern and is cyclical, very much like the weather. You know, winter, spring, summer, and fall. I'm not sure whether it's still winter. It's moving to summer. I'm not sure. We've been covering plants every night. It's been an adventure. But change follows a predictable pattern and it's cyclical. And so, showing my age here, we wanted to kind of create something that was kind of like a compass for leaders. That at any given moment you could take a compass reading and kind of know where am I at and what is required in terms of my leading my people. Which brings me to the next law, that everyone experiences change in different ways and at different paces. This also will show my age. This is my favorite Bugs Bunny cartoon from when I was a kid. And just like in the old classic story of the tortoise and the hare, some people might start out and be way ahead of everybody else as it applies to change. And then at some point in the journey, it's likely to be that people will shift positions. and shift places in the path to change. And as leaders, we need to remember that people are going to experience it at different paces and in different ways, but also it's kind of a pain in the neck, right? It would be great if we could herd everybody together instead of trying to herd cats. You're going to be experiencing change while you're leading it. This is a slide from my friend Beth, who is a Bears fan, if you haven't determined that by her background. And when I Googled quarterbacks being sacked, this was literally the first one came up. So it was destiny that I choose this one. But if you think about a quarterback, you know, we have plays and they look good on paper, they look good on our call sheet. We put the plays into motion, but they don't always go exactly as we planned. And so even though our job is to lead other people through change, and even though we've had some time to think about what our implementation is going to look like, et cetera, we're still going to be experiencing it right along with everyone else. So it's kind of important for us to kind of keep that in mind. Everyone has to move through all 4 phases of change in order for it to be sustainable. And we're really in a war for people's head, their intellect when we get started and when we move back to launch. And we're really in a war for their heart, you know, the emotional side of as people move through change and trying to discover what the new normal is. And this will make more sense when I share the actual model with you in a moment. And probably the last and biggest thing is that leading change is the most important and challenging job that you're going to do as a leader. And kind of chose this particular graphic or picture as an illustration of, you know, I'm trying to lead people through change as I'm also experiencing it. And there are days where it feels like I might be crushed in the process, or I am being crushed in the process, which I would say is very, very normal. And so those are kind of the laws. And this is the model that we wanted to introduce you today. And it's cyclical, as I mentioned before, and circular. Again, showing my age, I wanted it to look like a compass. When we developed this 20 some years ago, I wanted a way to find out where am I in my journey and chart the new normal in terms of, or where is true north on my compass. And so as you can read, there's initiation, clarity, confusion, clarity, and launch, and then regulating tension, and we'll come back to that one in a moment. As we're moving through change, I always think of initiation as kind of true north on my compass. It's where I take the reading and I'm looking at my map and where am I going? And so when you think about initiating change, it's really important in that first phase of change that we're describing very specifically what are we doing and why is it important? Again, if you think of the graphic with the young lady pointing, the tennis player pointing at her head, we're really trying to get people intellectually on board. We're looking for permission to get started in doing something. Think of it as creating the context for the change that we're about to make. And then hopefully we're spending a few moments predicting some of the things that were likely to occur or experience as we move through the change process. And those predictions really are an inoculation for the reality that things aren't going to go as planned, like that play that Jay Cutler called just before he was sacked. Sorry, Beth. So we need to make some predictions, right? We need to, you know, and predictions aren't all bad, right? So talking about what is likely to occur, what are we likely to experience that's good, bad, what's going to go well, what might not go so well, what might the impact be from an emotional standpoint on relationships, et cetera. And the purpose for that is at some point we're going to transition down into confusion. And this is really where we as individuals start to realize that, well, wait a minute, I didn't know this was going to impact me. You know, this sounded like a good idea until suddenly I discover that, holy mackerel, this really impacts me. Our office is located out on Double F off of Highway 29. And a very simple illustration of this would be a few years back when they were going to build the bridge that is now the exit where you get off to go to our office on Double F. It was one of the most dangerous intersections on Highway 29. Unfortunately, a lot of accidents and a lot of deaths, actually. And I can remember a 1 week period of time where they changed my route to work no less than a half dozen times. And I went from about a 22-minute commute to an hour and a half one morning. And so they kept changing my route. And so this would be a moment where I would take pause and suggest, And I can see 4 of you, so I'll take 4 of you as affirmation of what I'm about to say, that we are, in fact, as human beings, creatures of habit. Yes or yes? Yes, right? I have certain rituals in the morning. Kristen, who we work with, if you mess with her coffee in the morning, that's going to be a problem. You know, you squeeze the toothpaste in the wrong space, that's going to be a problem. Those of you that are getting used to working at home with children are challenging your normal. And so as we move people through change, it's really about helping them to chart the path to what the new normal is going to be, and whether or not I can make it, I want to make it, etc. And confusion is really where people start to experience that things are different and not going to be well. That hour-and-a-half commute, I thought I was going to be an hour late for a meeting. By the grace of God, that person also got their route changed around, so we arrived at the same time. So it's really exploring not only the impact on the process, will I be able to do this, skill set, will I be able to make this happen, but also what is the impact on relationships that I have that are really important to me? How will those be impacted? How will they change? And assuming for the moment that we have successfully been able to kind of address those questions and help people to move forward, that's where we really start to move into clarity, the new normal. And this is really where I start to get it. And I would say to you that there is an iterative process back and forth between clarity and confusion. It would be great if the light bulb went on and I got it and I went. But again, if I go back to that Jay Cutler slide, the light bulb went on and we had a plan, but then they caught wind of our plan and they shut us down. So maybe we don't know how to win as the Bears. And then they called another play and they actually succeeded. So maybe they do know how to win as the Bears. We'll find out this season whether they know how to win again, right? But this can be an iterative and frustrating process for most people because it isn't a once and done typically. And that's something important for us to keep in mind, even for ourselves, because again, I remind you that as we are leading change, we are also experiencing it ourselves. And so it's really about checking for understanding and people beginning to embrace what the new normal looks like, what their role in it is, which to me is very, very critical step, is really helping people to understand the role that they play in the new normal as they move forward. And finally, assuming that we continue to move forward, we make it to launch, and this is where we really get it. And this is where we move from something on paper to putting it into action, putting our play into action. And then kind of identifying what's next, because as we talked about on the very first law of change from Heraclitus back in 500 BC, change is inevitable and it's cyclical, so it's going to start again. I'm guessing when Jay Cutler left the huddle back then, he knew what the play was going to be. He put it into action and they were shut down. And so they had to go back and say, okay, maybe that didn't work. What's the next play that we have called, and put it into action. So that idea of moving through change, I've got to move through all 4 of those stages in order for change to be sustainable, which brings us back to the external, internal slide. So external, we talked about things happening external to us, right? The weather, gas prices, taxes, a virus that we can't see, right? The new requirements of I have to wear a mask in these places, but it's, you know, a la carte in these places. There's a lot of things that are happening externally to us that we really don't have a whole lot of control over. If you think about the change that you had to initiate, many of you, we're working from home. Beth and I, we have these backgrounds up, not because we're fans, we just don't want you to see our messy houses, right? So we're trying to, you know, look professional, right? For many of you, working from home this might have been for the very first time. For others, it was something that you're very, very used to doing. If it was happening to you for the first time, okay, I don't know how this is going to work. I have 3 college-age students, actually 2 that are post-college. All of them are living in my house. All of them are using the Wi-Fi. All of them are competing for bandwidth, space, and groceries. My office was going to be my daughter's bedroom, which she promptly came home, bought paint, painted her office, and moved back in. And so I didn't get to have my office. So trying to figure out, how do I make this, how do I figure all this out? And if we move through all 4 stages of change, when we get to launch, hopefully we've been able to internalize the change that someone is experiencing. It has become the new normal. The new normal for me is I don't have a 22-minute commute, I have a minute and a half. The new normal is I don't have a Keurig to use like I do at the office, and lots of choices. I have a little tiny 5-cup coffee maker, and I get to make whatever I have left, which I think is French vanilla. And I'm on strike and not having coffee because I'm sick of it, right? So that idea of, if we're going to help people successfully move through change, we have to help them get from something externally that is happening to them that they don't understand. They don't, when they get to confusion, how is this going to work? How is this going to impact me? To helping them to find the new normal. I know what my role is. I know how to be successful. I know how to stay connected to people. It is now, in fact, the new normal because it's internal to me. So hopefully that made sense. The last piece I want to talk about is really the dynamics going on in initiation and launch, and the dynamics in confusion and clarity. If you think about initiation and launch as really the place where we're in a war for people's head and intellect. It's a very outward process. There's a lot of communication. There's a lot of energy. There's a lot of interaction between people. When we're laying out the plan, people are asking questions. We're using a lot of words to explain it. And when we're at launch, we're communicating steps we're taking. How is it working? What's going on? And there tends to be a pretty high level of enthusiasm. On the bottom half, in confusion and clarity, it's really much more of an inward process, right? It's an emotional process where when I launch into confusion, I'm going, holy buckets, what if I can't do this? What if I can't work from home? What if I have a presentation to give and I tell everyone in my house, do not touch anything electronic from 1:30 to 2:30 on Monday the 11th, because I don't want it to not work, right? What if it doesn't work? And that can, again, be kind of an iterative process back and forth. And so as leaders, it's really important for us to remember, as we're leading people through change, that we can't always engage them with the same tool in our toolbox. If somebody's in confusion and I engage them with my intellect, it's like, I don't know, it's like bringing a knife to a gunfight. You're probably not going to win that argument, right? And so it's really making sure that you are keeping in mind in each stage of change, am I talking to people's heads or am I talking to their hearts? Lastly, I want to talk about probably the most important part of that slide, and I took the liberty of putting it in the upper right for you so that you still have the visual, and that's regulating tension. If we don't regulate tension, if there's too little or too much tension, people aren't going to change. You're either going to, with too little change, you have complacency and people remain the same. If you have too much, it leads to paralysis and people will not engage. I always think of change, and if there's too much, it looks like that guy trying to melt into the wall, and hopefully if I close my eyes, it'll pass by, it won't touch me, it won't hurt me, it'll go right on by, and I don't have to do anything to be different. If I use my children as a very simple example, when they were younger, show of hands, how many of you enjoyed jumping on a bed at some point in your career? You know, show of hands, how many of you still do? I still do the nesty plunge at every hotel I've ever been in at 54 years old. So I remember telling my kids, don't jump on your bed, right? Just like my parents told me, don't jump on your bed, which if you think about it, there's not a lot of tension there. If all I have is words, why wouldn't I jump on the bed? It's a gas, it's a lot of fun. I think about the day that I heard this horrific crash emanating from my boys' bedroom. I have 2 boys and a girl. And all 3 children were in the bedroom last I looked. And I came flying up the steps and came around the corner. And here are 3 children with eyes as big as saucers laying amongst the debris of a bed that has collapsed because they broke the slats. Actually, what they did is they moved them from repeated jumping, and the bed went crashing through the frame, scared the daylights out of them. They were absolutely paralyzed. So we had a conversation about jumping on the bed that led to them realizing that that's not a good thing, right? It's critical for us as leaders to remember that we're going through the change process the same as everybody else. And so we need to regulate our own tension first. If we've got too much tension, we're probably not going to be the best leader that we know how to be. If we have too little tension, then we're not going to have that call of action and that sense of urgency. So where am I as a leader and what do I need to do to make sure I'm taking care of me, so that then in turn I can take care of everybody else. It's just like for those of you that have flown the old oxygen thing, there's a guy that works for Delta. I can't wait to see if he'll start putting that mask on really tight like he used to the next time I fly. I'm guessing not. But you have to put your own oxygen mask on first before you can help other people. Leadership is no different. I need to make sure that I'm in a good place in order to lead people through change. And so this is where I'm going to hand it off to my partner in crime, but I wanted to give you a quick reminder that there's 4 stages of change: initiation, confusion, clarity, and launch. All people have to go through all 4 stages of change in order for it to be sustainable. We need to be able to regulate our tension and their tension. Too much, too little. We don't move. And we're going through it the same as everybody else. And last and again, not least, man, everybody goes through it at a different pace and in a different way. And so we got to herd those cats. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to my very esteemed colleague, Beth.
Thanks, Tom. You know, I know we said we were going to keep all the questions till the end, but I noticed in the chat an emergency question. Someone's wondering if Chicago still has an NFL team. So that's yes. So all of you closet Chicago fans on this call, don't be worried. There still is a Bears team for the upcoming season. So it'd be very fun to play the Packers in that last season, the end of the season game this year. Also, I'd like to know, since I can't see everybody's jerseys, if there are any Bears fans out there. Even if you feel good enough to say it to everybody, that'd be great. But if you want to just private message me, I would enjoy that as well. Anyway, back to business. Thanks for talking to us a little bit about that change process model that we use at Pathmakers, as well as providing just great insight into how to process change and how to lead others through the change. Certainly change can be scary, but it can also be exciting. And it's something that's difficult to both experience change and lead it simultaneously, as you talked about, Tom. We're really hoping that soon we'll be transitioning into this new normal workplace. And even though we don't really know what that looks like, we're hoping that we can talk a little bit today about some things that you can do to address the confusion part for employees and provide some clarity around that. So we're going to share a few thoughts with you about charting that path to the new normal workplace. And we have identified what we believe are 5 key components, beginning with logistics. I know there's been a lot of chatter about logistics, and most people tend to dive into that part of their plan first. So we will spend some time on that today, but we're going to encourage you to look at 4 additional components that we believe are equally as important as logistics, and those are emotions. So really considering the emotions of your employees as well as your customers as we're transitioning. Discoveries, which is really identifying the discoveries from this time of change and transition that we're all going through. Innovation, so creating a space and an environment for your employees to be innovative. And then lastly, creating a team that will thrive through this transition as well into the future. So we'll go ahead and dive right away into that logistics piece. We're going to talk about 3 main points of that, and that's talent strategy, safety, and communication continuity. There are certainly a lot of things to consider around logistics. I know that you're probably spending a lot of time here, and there's a lot of advice out there. We've seen tons of webinars on it ourselves. We're going to suggest to you a couple key things that are, making sure that you're keeping in mind the culture that you want to create and or sustain through this time period, as well as weaving your values into your plan. So we believe that the values really should be what ties your plan together. And that's an important thing to consider throughout this entire time that we talk about these 5 components. So talking about talent strategy specifically, talent is a key component to our business, and we all know we need to be strategic around it, and this transition isn't any different. Some of the big things that you might be looking at are your staffing levels. So, what are the staffing needs going to be right away and as you transition into your new normal workplace, and how soon will you be opening up and bringing those employees back into that physical environment? Are you going to be doing that as soon as possible? Will you use a phased approach? Maybe you'll be rotating, like a Monday, Wednesday, Friday for half of the employees, Tuesday, Thursday for the other half. We've met some people who've discovered that working from home is a pretty good new part to their business. So maybe you're keeping people working from home longer or even on a regular basis. And all of these things are obviously dependent on your specific business needs, as well as safety, which we'll talk about in a minute, the available workforce, any regulations that we're all under, and lots of other components. So we also want to address safety. It's on the minds of probably everyone out there today, and there certainly is a range of safety concerns. You know, we talk often about there are people who are going to be nervous and anxious about returning to the workplace, and how clean is it, and how likely might I be to catch COVID, while others are going to come running in and want to hug their coworkers. And your job as a leader is going to be to assure the safety and wellness and health of all of those types of employees with different concerns. So outlining safety measures will be a key component for your employees. Some things that you might want to consider are having procedures for your meeting spaces and common areas, which would include knowing who's in those areas and when they're in them and when they're exiting them. So having some sort of tracking mechanism, I think, would be helpful for your employees so that they understand that procedure and why you're doing it. Also, having clearly outlined cleaning protocols. I don't know about you, but I don't typically clean my office on a regular basis, so I might need a little bit of understanding of what we're expecting in terms of directions for cleaning and supplies needed for cleaning and how often you're doing that. Also, you know, we've heard a lot of talk about informing employees with what you've done about the air filtration system. In my 20+ years as an HR professional, I don't think I ever had a question or a concern about the air filtration system, but there certainly is a lot of conversation and talk around that right now. So, you know, if that's a concern of your employees, addressing it would be meaningful for them, and making sure they know what you've done and what your plans are around that area. You know, being upfront with your employees regarding safety is going to help lessen their fears and help them be more productive in the workplace. So that third piece then is communication continuity. You'll see as we talk throughout these 5 components that communication is going to be a key piece as well. Communication continuity is very valuable to your employees. Some things you might consider are, how are you communicating with your employees? What methods are you using? And how is this different? So, you know, right now we're using a lot of Zoom and Microsoft Teams to do our work. But as we're transitioning back into the workplace, we're probably going to be using all of our methods of communication, maybe still some Zoom with clients, but also, you know, being able to pop into one another's office and email. How are we going to communicate regularly with one another? That will be very important to your employees as you're leading them. Also, how frequently are you communicating? We believe it's important for you to have a regular communication cadence with your employees so they know when you're going to be providing information, and also what those key topics of information and updates will be. This is a great place to tie your values into communication. So maybe you're even tying your updates directly to each one of your values in your organization. Also, are you seeking feedback from your employees? We believe it's really important to seek feedback pre-transition, during transition, and post-transition, so you know where they're at and how they're feeling. You can do this in a variety of ways. You know, some people prefer one-on-one meetings or conversations or team meetings, but you could also have, you know, a focus group or a cross-functional group of employees, so you're gaining multiple perspectives. Or maybe you're doing a survey to your entire organization so that you really gain a grasp on what those concerns are for your employees. Well, there are a number of options. You know, you get to choose which one is best for your organization, but the more you know about what concerns are, the better you'll be able to address them. And what better way to transition into the next component of the plan, which is to consider the emotions of employees. You know, using communication is the best way to really know and understand what those emotions are. We've certainly seen a range of emotions, past, present, and we will into the future as well, because as Tom talked about, people process change differently, and they also feel different emotions. As an example, Now, I've talked to lots and lots of people about this and during this entire time. Some people have said, wow, it's actually been kind of nice to slow down and relax and not be running so much. And I have a friend who's bored out of her mind, and she's telling me, oh my gosh, I'm never alone. I miss going to restaurants, I miss traveling and activities. So there are just a lot of different emotions that people are feeling right now. But also as we move through the change, our emotions may be changing. I think about at the beginning of this, some of our emotions centered around what is COVID and what does this even mean? I don't even know what's happening right now. I'm unsure about working from home and also helping my kids with online schooling. Should I be wearing a mask? Should I even be going out in public? Should I be getting more toilet paper? Will there be any toilet paper when I go to get it? We had a variety of different emotions and thoughts that we were having. And now they're probably centered around some different things, wondering if it's safe or not. Maybe now I'm seeing more people that are gathering, so am I safe? When will this safer at home be lifted? Will it be extended? How might I feel as I'm transitioning to this new normal? What's it going to look like? And will I transition well? Will I have learned enough from this to transition into the new normal? So while there are a range of emotions that we're processing and will be processing, we have to figure out how can we incorporate that into our plan. So some things that we think that you should consider would be, how will you know the emotions that people are feeling? We suggest, rather than avoiding them or letting them kind of pile up until they erupt, that you lean into those conversations and ask your employees how they're feeling. And once you've asked them, the important part would really be to address that diversity of feelings, right? So there may be people who are worried about going back to work, but also having to having online schooling at home with their kids. And if you can address that in your plan, it's going to help them do both effectively. Or maybe there are safety concerns that we talked about earlier. And if you're able to consider those safety concerns and the emotions around them, it's going to help lessen the fears and help people feel safe and be more productive in their work. Tom talked a little bit too about making predictions, if we can make any predictions throughout this change. So are we able to make those emotional predictions of the future? How will this transition affect their emotions? What if there's an extension? What if there's an additional safer at home time in our future? How might the emotions change? And how are you going to address those in your plan? And last but not least, what resources do you have available to your employees to help process those emotions? Do you have an employee assistance program? If not, are there local community resources that maybe you could share with them? And as a team leader, what are you specifically going to do to help support your employees as well as to encourage them to support one another? So it's going to be really important for you to find some additional time and space for your team to do that. Identifying the emotions accurately and using them really as discoveries will help us to reframe our situation and really look at it from more of what have we learned and what are we learning? Which brings us to our next component of the plan, which is discoveries. So while we've been safer at home, we have made some discoveries, hopefully, about ourselves and our families, our team, and our organization. And while, for today, we're going to be focusing primarily on those workplace pieces, I would really encourage you to sit down and have a conversation with your family and friends about this as well. What discoveries have you made during this process? So we're going to look at it both from the team and the organization perspective. So if you look at your team perspective, how might you identify what you've discovered with your team? You might ask them about what hidden strengths or key insights have they seen on the team during this time? Or were there any blind spots that you discovered that you need to close the gap on? What have you learned and how can you use that to plan for the future? Or maybe you've found some people on your team that have really emerged as key stars or leaders, and how, as a leader, are you going to help them grow and learn and build in their leadership? Which contributes to that whole organizational piece of Should these employees be considered in your succession planning, and how do they play into that talent strategy in your organization? Certainly during times of difficulty, some people are going to shine, and it's really important that you make sure that they know this, that you point it out to them, because not only is it going to make them feel valued, but it may also help them see something in themselves that they haven't seen before. If we can advance, Tom, to the next slide. Thanks. From the organizational perspective as well, it might be good to consider things like, what have we come to learn about ourselves and our organization and our industry that we didn't know before? And are we doing things that are new, that we didn't do before or didn't know that we could do? So I think about the organizations that are making masks or plastic shields for the grocery stores, or even hand sanitizer. Those were things they weren't doing before. So they discovered that they had the ability to do that. And knowing those discoveries helps transition to, what am I going to do with that in the future? Will we continue to do that? Will we make new discoveries that lead to other product lines? Also, what did we discover that we could do that we didn't know? So I talked a little bit earlier about people who've discovered that work from home is actually good for their organization. So maybe it's more productive for certain jobs in your organization, and you're going to consider working from home as a long-term strategy. Or maybe you've discovered new ways to do your business online. I know we've been doing a lot more Zoom with clients that we didn't do before, and so we've discovered how to do that effectively with our clients. We encourage you, while you're doing this, to really use an appreciative perspective, meaning look at this from what really worked and where people really shined, because focusing on those areas of success is only going to bring about more success. I know we've experienced shining moments, and I hope you did as well, because that really does create that space and that environment that supports innovation and creativity, which is the next component of our plan. You know, based on these new experiences and the discoveries that we've talked about, there are likely areas that you are able to reinvent yourself or create a better version of your organization. We at Pathmakers have spent a lot of additional time looking at our coaching and our offerings and our marketing and trying to find better and new ways to do things. And while I think I speak for all of us when I say it's been hard not seeing each other and hard not seeing all of the wonderful people that we work with each day, I believe that we're going to have a better version of ourselves and our organization on the other side of this, because we have freed a space to be innovative. And we've also discovered how important new collaborations are. A fine example of that is this webinar with the Green Bay Chamber. And we encourage you to put some time and energy too in your plan to identify these new or emerging areas of collaboration now and into the future. If we can flip, yeah, there you go. It's also really important to empower your team to be creative and innovative as their leader. So this would encourage them to enhance the procedures and their engagement with their coworkers and their customers. I have a close friend who owns a bridal shop in Milwaukee, and early on she talked to me about the challenges of trying to find a way to sell bridal gowns when they can't come and try that dress on in the shop. But she has a very open space, and she's very creative and innovative, and her team identified a way to have brides say yes to the dress virtually. So they do a consultation, and they send dresses out, and they try on and they talk and discuss, and they have had brides say yes to the dress virtually, which is very exciting. And we've had conversation about, is that something that they'll continue to do in the future, where they'll still be, or they'll start to be online yes to the dresses, and maybe there'll even be a show about it that we all can watch. But also, it's important to inspire your team, yourself, by being innovative and by being curious and leading as an example, but also by pointing out innovation on your team and encouraging people to try new things, even if there is an opportunity for failure or they fail. Keep encouraging them to be innovative. So what better place to bring in basketball than in the discovery of, or in discovery and innovation. So I thought about the shot in basketball, certainly one of the key elements to the game. And it's really important not only to be accurate, but to have a shot that the defense is not able to block. So if we look at the granny shot, and I apologize, but I don't know who this gentleman is. Certainly the granny shot has accuracy to it, but the ability to block this shot is fairly easy. So we got creative and innovative and discovered the jump shot, which is much more difficult to defend and block, especially from the outside. And we see a great Larry Bird who did a nice job of being creative and practicing his shot and became well known for not only the accuracy, but the perfection in his jump shot. That becomes a little bit more difficult as you move into the paint, and the jump shot becomes a little bit easier to block, especially if your defender is taller, which is why the hook shot became an important shot for any centers to have. And you see here Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, who's known for his sky hook, because he was able to do the hook shot just from further out, right? Which is much more difficult to defend. But then there's also the slam dunk, which is difficult to defend because of the momentum and the drive and the shot. And you see Spud Webb here, who's 5'7", and I'm sure lots of people thought that he couldn't dunk, and he proved a lot of people wrong. And I know Tom and I have both showed our age today. I certainly have in just this one slide. However, I think each of these players worked really hard at their game, and they were creative and innovative and made a huge impact on the game of basketball because of that. You know, I'm really curious to see where the NBA goes next with their shot. Which brings us to our fifth and final component, which is creating team. Certainly, we're all leading teams in a variety of different ways and from a variety of locations, including, you know, some folks who are returning to the work environment, some who are working from home, some where you're still trying to figure out where they're working or where they'll be working from. So how do we as leaders normalize together what we've experienced and what we are experiencing? It's important to meet them where they're at and not force that change, but rather lead them through that change, and to honor the thoughts and feelings that they're having, which includes creating a plan that builds a sense of team, includes a non-judging environment, and where you encourage people to listen and support one another through the change. So we can go to the next slide. So how do you create that sense of team, and how do you build your new team? You're gonna need to ask yourself a few questions. Those might be, what and where are you at as a team, and how have you grown with one another? Also, what areas have you slid back in, and how might you rebuild in those areas? And then you as a leader, what are some actionable things that you can do to create team? And what can you do to help your team members invest in one another? This might include things like rebuilding trust among your team, or creating connectivity with either one another or the roles on your team or in your organization, finding new ways to collaborate with one another, and also finding new ways to build that team camaraderie when you're all face-to-face and are working in multiple locations. You want to be able to recreate the energy and the interaction among your team, and this requires a plan and a lot of conscientious action on your part and effort to rebuild and reinvest in that team. So we've talked about a lot of things today, and we tried to kind of create a little summary slide for you, just to give you, all of the thoughts on one slide. And we're gonna ask you to really take a minute or two right now to digest all the things we talked about and what you learned today, and think about two things that you can commit to doing as a leader that's going to help you chart that path to the new normal. So we really are going to ask you to either grab a piece of paper or bring up a blank screen on your computer, take a look at this slide, and write down two things that you can take away and make actionable for yourself and your organization. So we'll give you a minute or two to do that.
I had told Beth earlier today I was going to try and be cute and surprise her with the Packer fight song or something fun like that, but I thought I was not going to mess with technology on the eve of having to do this. So we decided quiet silence for contemplation would be the best. Um, I think this is where we'd like to turn it back over to Mickey for any questions that you might have had come up that we haven't addressed.
So first question was, does Chicago still have an NFL team?
We addressed that very clearly, I think. I did enjoy how Tom had to go back a few seasons to get some quarterback shots.
All right, let's see. What are some things you're doing to help your employees feel safe when returning to work?
I think one of the things that we're trying to do, we have an advantage in that there are only 6 of us. So we're not having to worry about a facility of 106. But one of the things that we're trying to do and be out ahead of is talking about it. Having conversations about people's comfort level in terms of being in the same space. We have an office situation where the majority of us are in offices proper, but also have conference space and common space. So starting now, having conversations about moving back to the office, what will that look like? What are people comfortable with? We're trying to pay attention to obviously the federal and state guidelines in terms of things that we need to keep in mind and common practices. But this is one of those things where I think Beth's comments about emotions and logistics kind of blend together. And so right now at this point, we're having conversation about what that looks like. We're talking masks, we're talking cleaning. My wife works for a local pharmacy in their blister packing department. And so, we're taking some guidelines from some of what they're doing in terms of cleaning into consideration, et cetera.
Thank you. Next question is, managing emotions will be huge in the transition. Check with your local EAP programs who may be able to offer some training for your leaders to help others manage emotions. Leaders will play an even larger role in the transition back to work than ever before. How to help our leaders be prepared? This isn't your typical leadership lesson.
I agree. And I think that slide about regulating tension becomes ever more important, or that part of the change process model of, first and foremost as leaders, what are we doing to make sure that we're good? I've been blessed to have an amazing team of people to work with. And I would say last week, Thursday was my day to not have a great day. I don't know that we were designed to work in captivity. And I'm sure some of it was the anxiety of, I've had the great honor and pleasure of presenting before, but never in this format. So there's like no energy coming back the other way, and you don't know if you're doing a good job. I took solace watching my priest on Sunday tell a joke and then remark that he doesn't know if it landed because nobody laughed. And thankfully, the music minister laughed for him, so that he had a little bit of reaction in the room. You're right. Whoever's question or comment this is, you're absolutely right. These are unprecedented times. And I think for any one of us to say, here's the 5 things you can do, and do all 5 of those and they'll work, would be, pumping sunshine up our own pant legs. From experience, the 5 things that we're talking about today are things that dealing with other companies in different kinds of crisis over the years have become important pieces of the puzzle. But I would come full circle back to it's really about taking care of yourself as a leader, making sure you're getting your emotions in the right place. Are you doing some things to be in a place of peace, be in a place of whether that's your own access of an EAP, it's listening to music, meditation, and then it's being honest with your employees that this is unprecedented, friends. I'm trying to figure this out as we all are. And so I'm asking for you to give me a little bit of grace. And I'm asking for you to give each other a little bit of grace because we're in it together. That statement to me, which has become very consistent and maybe even overplayed to some degree, it has never been more true. that we are in this together. And so I think it's about being honest and upfront that you don't have all the answers. I think that's a good leadership trait, no matter what, let alone a virus. Maybe that will be one of my takeaways as a leader because of a stupid virus I can't see, is to remember the importance of being honest and vulnerable with the people that I work for.
I would also add, making sure that you have that support network. So whether that's the leaders that surround you in your workplace, or it's other leaders that you have in your life that maybe are going through change or leading others through change, and you can bounce ideas off of them and get support from them and give support to them. I think, having great leaders and great people around you is going to be key in the transition back to whatever this workplace looks like.
And being willing to share, hey, this worked and this did not. This crashed and burned, so I can tell you at least don't do this, right?
Yeah.
It's being honest with each other about what's working and what's not.
Mm-hmm.
All right. How can we help leaders who are very uncomfortable in the emotions space with leadership?
I'll give that to Beth.
I think, well, first of all, I think practice makes perfect, right? You need to be able to lean into those conversations, and sometimes trying that in a safe space first works. But you're never going to get better at it if you don't try it. And so I say, lean into some of those things easily first, or practice them with a coworker, or certainly call a coach or a mentor who can coach you through how to share and ask questions that help people open up and really provide those feelings in a way that's comfortable for both you as the leader and the employee who you're talking with.
I think for me, when I'm in a space of not sure what to do about emotion, or just, I'm too much in my head. My children and other people's children and children in general have been great teachers of what it means to be emotional. They don't see limitations. They don't see boundaries. They don't put themselves in a box. They express emotion directly, maybe sometimes too directly. Mommy, why is that man so fat? I heard that the other day. And so, for me, it's really about, I'll go back to what I said a moment ago. It's about being vulnerable about that you don't have all the answers and that you're struggling with it as well. It's really about trying to create this kind of a relationship with people versus this kind of relationship. Yes, you are their boss, perhaps, or their leader, but you're a human being and you're going through an unprecedented time of change. And so what can you do to bring people to this space with you in terms of talking about the things that you've been concerned about or you're worried about, or, hey, I just don't feel like I'm very good at this. So maybe they can help you. I would argue that it is a muscle that every single one of us has. Some of us are more in tune with it than others, but it doesn't mean that you can't develop that muscle and put it to some pretty fantastic use. Don't be afraid, lean into it.
Yeah, I think there's the whole other half of that. I addressed it from the space of people who are afraid to even dive into the emotions, but there's also the piece of empaths who maybe dive into all that emotion, but it can be pretty heavy. So, going back to some of the tips that Tom had about, making sure you have a space to release that and to kind of work yourself through all of the emotions for yourself and for everyone that you're leading is going to be extremely important to keep yourself healthy. Because if you're not healthy, back to the oxygen masks, it's going to be very difficult for you to lead other people through a healthy transition and change.
Do we have any other questions? I think we answered them all in the chat box. You can take yourself off mute if you have a question. No questions. Quiet group. All right. Do you guys have anything else that you want to say?
Just first of all, hopefully the silence is not a reflection that we put you to sleep, but if we did, I hope you had a good nap, because that is one of the things that you can do to take good care of yourself, right? We just wanted to say thank you. Obviously, we're a playful bunch, hence the backgrounds for both of us. We had great fun doing this. If you have any questions that come up after the fact, or you know, we like skeptics. So if there's something that you're like, I think that guy was full of crud, I think she doesn't know what she's talking about. Questions, concerns, comments, whatever it might be, this is how you can get a hold of us. I would like to say thank you again on behalf of both Beth and I, and Pathmakers, to Mickey and to the Chamber, and to all of you for giving up some of your very valuable time to spend about an hour with us. It's been a blessing and it's been an honor for us, and I hope our paths cross in the future. Thanks.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you everyone for attending. Thank you, Tom and Beth, for taking time out of your day to present to us. It was very helpful and informative. We do have some more Chamber at Home events coming up in the future, and you can see those on our website. Also, this program was recorded, so you will be able to see this out on our website under Still Your Chamber. And just want to say thank you again. Thank you, everyone. Have a great day.
Very good.
Thank
Go
you.
Packers.
Go Bears.
Packers.